Built, Eighth Rose Coffee cultivates community by the cup. From Indianapolis, Ramon Foster. We've got in studio here in Nashville, Kayla Anderson. I am Will Bowling. And joining us on the phone lines for his weekly Tuesday visit on the show, he is VolQuest's Austin Price. Good morning, Austin. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you all doing?
We're good. Good morning.
We're great. And we've got an injunction decision from Clifton Corker and the East Tennessee federal judge last week. What is most significant about the reasoning, the decision, Austin, and how surprised were you that we got a decision so quickly?
I wasn't surprised. I thought it would come within 2 weeks. I thought there was a chance it could have pushed into early this week, but Friday got it done, and not surprised about the verdict. I think anybody, I'm not a legal person, but anybody that was kind of in the courthouse that day, if you just read how things were phrased, body language, kind of just common sense reaction stuff, and be able to read people, you could tell that the attorney for the state of Tennessee, Attorney General, got stronger and stronger and stronger. His closing argument about the NCAA wouldn't enter into a television contract agreement with one of the networks without knowing what offers were out there was really, really strong. And I thought the NCAA lawyer kind of fumbled, so to speak, whether kids could or couldn't speak with a collective ahead of time just to kind of get a roundabout, like somebody amongst your stature has made this here before, without saying, hey, you're going to make X. And he kind of just talked in circles, and I thought that was going to open itself up to what happened, and the state of Tennessee wins the injunction, and now where do we go from here? Does it make the trial? Does the NCAA pivot? Here, I mean, if you go to discovery, if you go to trial, then once that thing gets written into firm law and not just an injunction, all of a sudden you see these other cases that the NCAA is trying to handle, like them, the one out in California and so on and so forth. All of a sudden there's a precedent there, makes it much tougher for them to win those cases, if they can win those cases anyway.
Austin Price of VolQuest and On 3, our guest. Austin, do you expect the NCAA to still give Tennessee a notice of allegations?
Well, normally it comes really quick after they have their little summary meeting to kind of go over everything, and it never came because, obviously the state of Tennessee sued the NCAA, and I think that kind of threw them into a little bit of a tailspin there. And, I'm not sure we ever see the notice of allegations. I mean, is it possible? Sure, they could still send it, but, so much of the stuff that they're trying to retroactively punish Tennessee for wasn't even a guidance, much less a rule when any of the stuff happened. All that now is thrown out with the ruling by Judge Corker. So I'm not sure we see them throw, what they tried to, present to Tennessee at Tennessee.
Austin, as far as Tennessee goes with this, when it comes down to high school recruits, their parents, handlers, collectives, whatever you want to call them these days, when it comes down to the initial conversation, is it now just more of a open door conversation like, hey, how much am I getting before I sign?
Well, I mean, nobody really wants to do a lot of the paying before they sign. Like, I know there's some states that, have, the high schools allow that to happen. But, schools don't really want to get into that if they can avoid it. And, I think that, each situation is different. But I do think that a lot of times this is more like, hey, once you get here, kind of this is what, we're thinking your NIL value is based off of metrics and all that stuff that they try to, use to try to determine, what a kid's value is. I think that's like an impossible task. Like, what is the value of someone? I mean, like, the value is, 10 schools may say the value is, $5, and then one other one says his value is $25. Well, what's his value? His value is $25 because the one school would do that, right? So, I think that it just opens up to have a little more open dialogue. The gray area, the hypotheticals kind of go out the window, so to speak, now, and they can just kind of talk a little more freely and no, I mean, all these schools have been talking to these kids during the recruiting process. Sometimes it's coaches, sometimes it's collectives, sometimes it's both. But everybody's trying to act like everybody has been acting like this stuff didn't go on when it did. Now it can just go on, and they can negotiate and kind of figure out what their value is at each school.
Austin, I have to ask this one too, because now we know it's above board essentially with these negotiations. Will we see a situation to where these NILs will start to hold these prospects, to the fire as far as like the contracts that they do sign? Like, will we see a mandated 2-year commitment or 3-year commitment when it comes down to the amount of dollars that's being paid out, the commitment to the university and the relationships that you're trying to build? And also, we have this because you're trying to sustain winning. Do we see a situation where guys will be locked into contracts and teams, essentially a pro model?
I think you'd have to have some legislation. I think you'd have to have some guidelines and rules to follow first. I think that sounds great what you're proposing, Ramon. But right now, currently, you have the transfer model where you can just transfer at will and do it as many times as you want and all that. And then you have the NIL model, which is, kids can negotiate and, get the best deal for them. Problem is, that doesn't set up to do what you're wanting to do. I think what you're, recommending or suggesting is a really good idea, right? Like, you let them negotiate, but once they enter into an agreement, they've got to stay so long, right? Problem is with the ruling in the West Virginia case back in December about the 2-time transfer, that kind of opened up Pandora's box for there to be a constant negotiation amongst collective schools and the players.
Austin Price, so kind to join us this morning of VolQuest here on Ramon, Kayla, and Will. Austin, let's talk a little combine since it is happening right now up in Indianapolis. Kamal Haddon, Jalen Wright, Joe Milton, 3 Vols that are up there. Who can gain the most this week out of those 3?
I'm gonna go Kamal Haddon.
Okay.
Kamal Haddon had a really really nice year up until he got injured. I think he can really kind of rise. Now, who do I think is going to get drafted the highest? It's going to be Jalen Wright.
Yeah.
I think he can, with a good showing, can rise up. But I think Kamal Haddon could go, from late round to mid to, I'm not going to say first day. I don't think that's realistic. But could he slide into day 2 with a super strong performance? Yeah, maybe. He's got the length. He's got really good tape, and so like for Kamal Haddon, I think he has the most to gain from a strong showing. I think Jalen Wright's already thought of pretty highly amongst NFL, GMs and teams, and I think with a strong performance, he can definitely be a day 2 pick, and which for a running back is extremely strong.
Austin, when it comes to Joe, is this just the time we kind of say, hey, it is what it is, and look, if he draws attention at the combine for the arm that he has, which everybody always talks about, I think we have to look more into like the person he is, which we know he's a great leader. Like, how can he benefit in any way from the combine to be a guy that could go, maybe 5th, 6th round?
Well, he's going to test extremely well, Kayla. He's got all the physical attributes you could want. And so, like Kayla Williams is not going to throw at the combine, I guess.
Right.
If I'm Joe Milton, I'm throwing every time they let me, because you have more to prove, and you can't sit back and go, I'm not going to throw here. I'm just going to wait on my pro day. Like, I think you have to kind of be willing to show what you have at any turn. And so I think for Joe, his ability to rise is based off of him being willing to do that, and then performing at a high level when he tests. Because I do think he's going to run well, he's going to jump, he's going to have extreme strength and arm strength and all those physical traits. But it's the ability to do certain things that they're looking for. I think that's what will make or break where he gets drafted at.
Austin Price of VolQuest on 3, our guest. Austin, switching to the hardwood for this Tennessee team right now, how far away do you feel like they are from a number 1 seed, and what will it take to get on that top line?
I think if they go 3-1 in their next 4, I mean, no one's expecting them to go 4-0. I mean, they're all quad 1 wins if you win those. They can go 3-1 in the next 4, and then, depending on what everybody else does around them, I think that Tennessee's strength of schedule has to kick in at some point. I mean, my goodness, like if you look at just the losses Tennessee has, they're so strong. I mean, like these teams are all ranked in the top 15, top 10, top 5. So, and most of them are back, before Christmas. So, yeah, I think for my liking, I think it's just closing strong. Again, I don't think you have to go 4-0, but I think you need to win at least 3 to get on that to get that number 1 seed. And again, I think a lot of that also depends on what the other teams that are vying for the number 1 seed do around you.
Austin, with 800 wins for Rick Barnes, you look at some of the things he's been able to do at Tennessee. Vols have been ranked in the top 5 of the AP poll 24 times in the last 6 seasons. They had been ranked in the top 5 17 times in the previous 70 seasons and 70 years of the AP poll. Just how do you sum up the culture change of Tennessee hoops that Rick Barnes has been able to facilitate over time and the successes? What stands out to you the most about what he's been able to do?
Well, I mean, he just wins. I mean, I know he hasn't won big in the tournament like everybody wants, but I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Tennessee basketball on the men's side was terrible. And then they had a nice little run where they made the tournament sometimes, but then there was total inconsistency there. Bruce came in, had a nice run, then more inconsistency. Like anytime you can have sustained success, I think if you're a fan or even if you're just watching it, you have to appreciate, what he's done. He's done it his way. He started off, with kind of the non-Kevin Durant type player and started just building and building and building and developing. Now he's cherry-picked some of those highly thought of players, those 5-star type players into the process the last handful of years. But on the whole, he's done a really good job of getting players like Tobe Awaka, like, Zakai Ziegler, who are going to be 4-year players. And, those guys are all really, really solid basketball players that just kind of ingrained themselves into Rick Barnes' universe here amongst basketball at Tennessee, and they buy in, and they've had a lot of success because of it.
Austin, with Vols commit George McIntyre getting his 5-star designation, big-time get for the Vols and for him also. Who else is on the recruiting radar as that starts to pick up a little bit more as the year goes on?
Well, we're right now at the tail end of a dead period. Things open back up, first of next week. So you'll start seeing kids get to campus. Tennessee's, expected to have several big-time kids in the month of March and April for spring practice, the big weekend being March 23rd, which is the first full weekend after spring practice starts on the 18th. And, there'll be, other visitors sprinkling in here and there and everywhere. But Tennessee's big focus, offensive tackle. That's a big one. Defensive line, and then obviously already having George in the boat already helps. So, Joakim Dodson, who's now a Baylor wide receiver, is in the boat, and Tennessee would love to add the 2 other in-state receivers that are really highly thought of, that being Cam Sparks out of Chattanooga Baylor and Radarius Jackson out of the Memphis area. So, for George, he's got to continue to build around him on a national level and an in-state level, and he's done a really nice job of that. And right now there's nobody like expected to commit like this week or next, but I think Tennessee is got a big month ahead to kind of position themselves heading into spring and summer decisions.
Austin,
go ahead.
Sorry, Austin, I want to go back to basketball really quick. Is Zakai Ziegler, after that Missouri loss, was not happy, obviously, with himself and how he played. And just, I feel like the response that a lot of these players have, taking accountability individually, makes this team different too. In a world in college basketball where we're seeing upsets every single night, I feel like this is what also is making this team special this year, is that kind of accountability on this team.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to that South Carolina game. I think he had 2 points, and I remember being there and like Jeff Jarnigan, who does PA for basketball and football for that matter. He's kind of like going over the leading scores, and it was like so and so 2, so-and-so 2, so-and-so 2, Dalton Connect 31. And so, but it was more than just 2, 3 twos. It was like 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. I think a lot of those players kind of, it was a wake-up call for them. And, they lost to Texas A&M since then. And that was a game where, he and the others didn't play great, didn't play terrible, just didn't play well enough. But, he's been fantastic ever since. And really, if you go back to December, that's when he kind of felt like he was fully healthy. And, he's been fantastic on defense. His ability to get in the paint and fit passes to the post in tight windows is fantastic. And, I think he's shooting the 3-ball better this year than he's ever shot it. So, he's really playing at a high level.
We get the best info on Tennessee from our good friend Austin Price of VolQuest every Tuesday morning at 8:20. A VolQuest subscription, a must-have if you are a Vols fan. Austin, we appreciate the time as always. Thank you.
Definitely.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thanks,
Yes,
Austin.
sir. There's Austin Price with us this morning. They've got a Vol Club confidential interview up with Christian Moore of Tennessee baseball as well. So it's just incredible looking at those stats specifically, and the one I brought up with Austin about Tennessee being in the top 5 of the AP poll 24 times in the last 6 seasons. And in the 70 years before that, they had been in the top 5 17 times. Right. Rick Barnes has had Tennessee in the top 5 more in the last 6 years than in the 70 years before it.
Big.
So it's important perspective, I think, for Tennessee fans to remember if you have a difficult loss at Alabama or at South Carolina or even at home to Auburn or Kentucky over these last few weeks, you are in as good a spot as Tennessee basketball has been for a 6-year span in a long time and probably ever.
That's where I sit sometimes with fans as far as trying to figure out where is the line with appreciating the day-to-day operation, like winning and being ranked in the top 5, and the hard conversation of, okay, well, when are you going to win us the championship?
Yeah.
That's always the biggest next step, and I think people think that it's easier than it actually is. But I like I said the other day when we talked about the night game they had against A&M at TBA, appreciate what that is, because that doesn't come often when you can flex your muscle and create a big show with pyro and explosions and night games and sellouts and checkerboard TBA. Appreciate it is where I'm at with it.
Our question of the morning at Ramon Kayla Will on Twitter: if you could talk with Brian Callahan or Rand Carthon at the Combine today, what would you ask him? We've got a half hour to take your calls on that. 615-737-1045 before Ron Slay of 3HL at SEC Network stops by at 9:20. That's right. But coming up next, you'll hear more from ESPN's Matt Miller, who wrote on ESPN.com about the 3 tackles he feels have first-round grades and why the third one is similar to Tennessee's Darnell Wright from last year. We'll get to that next.